So hi, this is Brad from Coffee for Closers. Today, my guest is Chad Lafferty, Managing Director of Wahl Case and Board Director at EQ-IQ. Chad, thanks for joining us today and making time.
Thank you very much for having us.
I mean, that's one of the things I like about recruiting is it forces us to kind of change and adapt. But some of the newer people coming into recruiting, or even people with zero experience, it's really interesting, right? Because what is the job of the recruiter now? The job description, I think, has totally changed. And like you said, there are a lot of factors that we need to measure that maybe we didn't have to measure, 5 years ago or more. So are you finding that the team you have now obviously works quite well, but in terms of new people that you're looking to bring on or new positions that are opening up, I mean, are you evaluating them differently, and what kind of things are you looking for?
Yeah, so for sure, we had hired 3 people that were starting in April, and so around March time, we kind of had a gut check. It was like, well, what are we gonna do? Honestly, like we felt like the only thing that we could do is have them start and immediately transition all of our trainings and everything to remote, which we did with, I think as much success as we possibly could have had, to be fair. Our, talent manager who handles all the training and courses and curriculum for the training did really a fantastic job of handling that transition. And still, it wouldn't be shocking or a surprise to say that their development was pretty far behind what they would have experienced if they'd started in the office with people around them. And that's because the way that people learn this job, the way that I learned the job, and probably you as well, there's so much passive learning that happens. Like you get sat at a desk with more experienced people around you, and it almost doesn't matter the environment. You can have like a really high level of training, which a lot of firms in Japan have. You can have almost no training, which a lot of firms in Japan have. But the way that you're going to get that like classroom style, but then you're also going to hear the people around you and how they work. And you're going to learn through that experience. And so what we found was, like, very early on, we realized, okay, they're not experiencing that at all. And it's very hard to recreate that. You can create a Zoom channel, you can put people in that, you can ask people to join that channel, but still, you have to mute when you're on the phone. Like you can't do the same level of activity. You can't kind of like have that experience where you're just sitting there doing your job and you hear somebody talking on the phone behind you and you're like, what are they talking about? Like, and it's such like it just happens. And so quite honestly, those 3 people, like, we're really working hard to help them get up to speed. And, they've been coming into the office a little bit more, even though it's still mostly empty, especially now that the cases are on the rise again. Like, people are just being cautious and staying at home more often. But we're trying to find ways to recreate that. And to come back to your question, it means that realistically, I think that we have to hire more experienced people than we have previously. Like, we have to change the parameters, because what we realize is that teaching them the very basics is much more challenging than it used to be. And this is also related to the question you asked before about our clients. And I think that onboarding has been one of the biggest challenges that every company faces right now. Like, how do you effectively onboard people that are working remotely? And some companies are better at it than others. Some people are more equipped for it than others. And so that's a big challenge for us as well. So certainly, like, our focus right now is hiring some more experienced people that we're not teaching like the very basic fundamental parts of recruitment too.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. It is something that I didn't really think about, right? Was, when you are in that open office platform and you do hear other people on the phone, experienced people or maybe conversations that you wouldn't have, you get that OJT, as somebody that's joining, but you don't have that now, right? So it's an interesting point. Yeah, definitely a different learning curve on that. So.
Yeah, for sure. And I, honestly, like, I've been very impressed with, as I mentioned, the 3 people that started for us in April. I've been very impressed about how they've handled it because it's tough. It's really hard. I can't imagine trying to learn a completely new profession, something I've never done before, spending an hour or two in training a day and then trying to figure out so much on your own. It's tough. I think they've done a really phenomenal job to be where they are today.
Yeah. So, you talked a little about, that you're looking at possibly bringing on more senior level people. I mean, in this market right now where there's a lot of transition, there are a lot of experienced recruiters from different shops, and a lot of them are being pushed out simply because of, they're being furloughed, or there's different issues going on in their company. What's the culture at Wahl Case, and what type of people would you be interested to bring on?
So we have a very strong set of values. I won't go through them all individually. There's 8 of them. They're on our website for anyone who's interested. Really, the way that we make decisions is by making sure that, number one, they align with the company vision and the company values. I suppose one of the reasons I've always hesitated to hire more experienced people is because they're coming from a very different cultural experience. They're coming from maybe a different set of values. And when we were all working in the office, I was pretty reluctant to have somebody come in at a more experienced level who might not match the same values that we've developed and the culture that we've developed very intentionally. And that's something that, to be honest, we have to be a little bit more flexible about. But I also think that the type of person that we want to hire, there's somebody that matches that value set. There's somebody that is a good, can I say not an asshole? Can I say that? I have a strict, actually I have a client, I'm stealing this from a client of mine, but they said they have a strict no asshole policy. And I was like, that's a great policy to have. I want to hire really good people that are, resilient and smart, but also they're good people. And they want to work in a team. They ultimately want the people around them to be successful. If they believe that, if they're really invested in their own success, but in the success of the people around them as well, and the company's success, then they'll do very well in our environment. They'll do very well in our culture, because that is, I think, one of the strongest, guiding principles that we have, that we're all in this together and that we'll work together through good and bad.
No, it's interesting. I mean, that just your choice of words is not wrong, obviously, because that's prevalent in a lot of different organizations. And I think to really come back to the people that are labeled as assholes in whatever industry they are in, I think it says a lot about the type of person, or also the environment, right? Because if the environment, if a company is letting that type of person be that type of person, then the environment's wrong, right? Like you were saying, the culture that you have there eliminates the possibility of having those type of people in the organization, which is good. But in our industry and a lot of other industries, that's rampant, right? Especially nowadays. I think you do have to be a little more cohesive of who you work with, and it's not just a me type of environment. It's more like, how can my experience help you, and how can we have a win-win situation together? So no, it's definitely interesting that you're creating that culture, and you're also willing to look for senior level people that might be a little more difficult to train or to see, to fit into your culture. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think it's, and forgive me for my choice of words, it's the word that popped into mind first. But, transparency is one of our values. So there you go. I think that it's very important, and people are a product of their environment as well, right? So I think that, if you've been working in a super hyper aggressive agency where you have to fend for yourself, and it is, food on your plate, then you've probably adapted to that type of situation. That doesn't define you, though. That doesn't define the person. And I don't want to generalize that part of it, because I think different people can grow into an environment differently, right? If they're given the opportunity to be different, then they probably would be. I do think it's harder for people that have been in that very individualistic environment to adapt to a culture where there's such a strong team aesthetic, that information sharing and the transparency is absolute. I think that's probably the biggest culture shock that people would experience. And I actually, I can say that from my own experience because I came from Robert Walters, which, is a very team-based, it's a shared database. It's everyone's helping each other out, and your team is usually going to have your back and all that kind of stuff. And I still found it surprising when I joined Wahl Case, the level of transparency and the level of support that, people provided me and to anyone who is a new starter, right? And so I think, if that's the biggest culture shock for me, joining from a company that already had a similar type of system, then I can only imagine if you've, spent time in a more aggressive or individualistic environment. But it comes down to what you want and what kind of person and what suits you best. So.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, time-wise, I'd be interested, to pick your brain a bit on, that was one of the areas that I wanted to pick on in terms of like, you did come from the Robert Walters, large agency style into Wahl Case, which is much more, like you said, cohesive. It's a smaller boutique style. What did you find as the hardest thing into that transition? And what would you say to other people that are kind of coming from that mindset of like extreme styles?
So I think that with EQIQ and Wahl Case as a part of EQIQ, we're trying to do something that's different. And anything different is going to be really hard. And it's going to have a very unique set of challenges. And so even though Wahl Case operates in a way that people would recognize, it's like we are a recruitment agency, and the things we do are recruitment related. The fundamental vision of where EQIQ is going and where Wahl Case needs to go is different. And that is challenging, because if anybody comes in and they're expecting that they're going to join very traditional recruitment company where it's all about, revenue and making placements and bonuses, then the learning curve is going to be higher, right? Because those things are fine. And of course, we want to make revenue. We want to grow the company. I want everyone to get like huge bonuses and stuff like that. But we're aiming for something bigger. And that's, related to the growth of Attuned, how we are positioning ourselves in the market as HR technology. And I think through those things, it's the company, the way that we operate is different. The way that we talk is different. The way that we share information is different. And so I think that, when I joined, it was a case of like all this information about, at that time, 3 years ago, Attuned was still fairly early stage. It was a lot to wrap my head around. And I think that that's one of the challenges, not just of coming in, but also adapting to the culture that we have, is understanding that, the recruitment side is part of a much bigger plan that we have. And that is very much I don't want this to sound negative, but, the Robert Walters, the Michael Pages of the world, they do what they do incredibly well. And they've grown massively based on that. But I don't see as much, innovation. And I think there's a lot of smaller companies that, they don't have any desire to innovate, which is fine, because there's in the market that we're in Japan, I think that there's a lot of money to be made in this business, right? Without doing anything particularly, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, I guess what I'm saying. So for us, again, the mission is a little bit different, which makes it more complicated. And it's more for people to wrap their heads around, I guess.
Well, hey, thanks again for your time today and all your insights. And definitely for any viewers out there that are interested, feel free to reach out to Chad directly or the people at Wahl Case. And again, thanks for watching. Chad, thanks for joining us.
Brad, thank you very much. It was great.
All right. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more great content from Coffee for Closers. Take care.